Thanks everybody for coming. We're here obviously to talk about Jack Sonni's wonderful book, Sagamore, which my wife Susan and I were privileged to release on our, what we call the world's tiniest book label, Cool Dog Sounds. But, and all of these people were involved in one level or another and were very helpful. And I'd say why don't we start with the short readings. Everybody picked a passage that they wanted to read. John T's got a pinch reader, so we'll start down there with so she can get in the bullpen and warm up.
Yeah,
whatever
we
sports
didn't really-
analogy is.
We didn't talk about this beforehand, so hopefully I didn't pick something that somebody else picked. I'm just going to read chapter 8, which that sounds like a lot, but it's a short chapter. It's like a page and a half. And we did a thing back when the book came out, I guess, in August, was it?
Yeah.
At Proud Larry's. It was great. It was really wonderful. But, Jack and I, one of the things we kind of bonded over was our Italian roots. My last name is Boyle, so people think I'm Irish, but I'm not. My dad was Scottish, but I grew up just with the Italian side.
Okay.
I've got all sorts of identity issues. I grew up only with the Italian side of my family, my mom's side of the family in Brooklyn. So that was something Jack and I really, had in common and talked a lot about, along with music and books and a lot of other stuff. So anyway, at the Proud Larry's thing, everybody did a great job, but there's a lot of Italian slang in this book, and people did not do a great job with that. And that was kind of hard for me to listen to. So I get to do a little bit of that in this chapter. And I don't, I'm not trying to come down as judgmental, because I grew up around Italian, but I don't speak it, but I do speak, the curse words and the slangs.
Important stuff.
Yeah. So this is a short chapter, as I said, chapter 8. I'm just going to jump in, and I don't know where else other people are reading from, but we're going to probably be just kind of wandering around this book. Corky arrived at his grandmother's house after leaving Sonni at the mine gate. He sat in the kitchen and told her what happened in the woods. The tears had stopped as waves of rage rolled through his body. He punched his thigh with a balled fist, eyes fixed on a knot in a floorboard near his feet. His grandmother listened without remark and rose from her chair to cross the kitchen. She opened a cabinet and withdrew 2 small glasses and a tall bottle, then returned to sit at the table. She poured a double finger of clear liquid into each glass, pushed one across to her grandson, and raising her glass, motioned for the boy to drink. Corky took a sip, winced, then threw back the rest, slamming the glass onto the table. A shudder racked his shoulders as the heat slid into his chest. He is a bad man, this game warden, Gina said. And Pazzo. She tapped her forehead. I'm going to kill him, Corky said, and tears came again. The old woman snorted and shook her head slowly. No, she said, you will not kill him. He straightened in his chair and glared. Why not? You don't think I can? That man needs to die. See, he does. This is not for you, killing. This is not what you do. She waved her hand at Corky. Believe me, this animale, Markle, he will have a problem one day, but he is dangerous and not for you to deal with. Corky shook his head. He shot at me, and Sonni, he killed my dog, Nona. There are more dogs, she said. There are no more grandsons. The boy held his grandmother's gaze. Gina Ferraro was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but anyone who took the woman's stature and delicate features as signs of frailty was a fool. Corky knew all the stories, but he found it near impossible to conceive of his grandmother as a killer. But when she was angry, his fleeting thought was that maybe an act such as murder wasn't so far-fetched. Right now, in this moment, full of rage and pain, he hoped it was all true and she would be able to fix this and make one more problem disappear. His time will come. A presto, she said. Go home. Tell your father what happened with this animale game warden. Tell him about your dog. Tell him not to worry or get involved. and you hunt someplace else and stay away from that man. Believe me, his time will come soon. Corky sat up, rubbed his face briskly, then ran a sleeve across his eyes, drying the remaining tears. He pushed himself from the table, stood, gathered up his shotgun, and slung the game bag over his shoulder. "All right, Nona," he said. "I hope you're right." He moved around the table and bent to kiss his grandmother's forehead. Gina reached up and gave the boy's cheek a pat that ended with a pinch. She pressed a finger to her lips and winked. "You don't tell him about the grappa, capiche?" Corky smiled and with a wink turned and went out the back door, stepping into the dark. Gina stood on the back porch, watching the boy walk the road towards home and disappear in the night. Returning inside, she crossed the kitchen to the stove and brought a box of wooden matches and a small plate with her to the table. From a drawer in the sideboard, Gina drew a prayer card with the image of Michael, the avenging angel. She sat, holding the card. As her lips moved in a whispered malediction, she struck a match and touched the flame to the edge of the card. She watched it burn, repeating the curse until she could hold it no longer and dropped the blackening paper onto the plate. With the smoke curling upwards, Gina closed her eyes and, conjuring a vision of the game warden's painful end, knew she could not wait for Sheriff Johnson to act. There was no choice other than to make a phone call in the morning to Pittsburgh.
Hi everybody, I'm Beth Fennelly, and I'm going to read the very, very opening of the second chapter, and it features the same character, Corky, the boy, but a little bit earlier in the book. And the reason why I picked this section is because I remember when I was reading this book in manuscript, loving the little bit of backstory we get about Corky, and it's a simple thing about how he got his nickname, but I thought when I read Jack's manuscript that his characters didn't seem thin and one-dimensional, and a writer I really love, Tobias Wolff, another writer I love, Adam Johnson, once said about Wolff, his characters come onto the page with a long shadow. And I understood that to mean it didn't seem like the characters were invented the moment the story began, but that they were people who had a history that they brought with them into the story. So I think you can get a little sense of that here. I'm going to borrow Blair's readers. I just started reading these and I forget to bring them with me. It's horrible. It's horrible to be old and forgetful. Okay. So it's just one page, y'all. The boy woke to the same black of his sleeping. He lay in the deep dark of early morning, knowing the time without needing to check the watch ticking on the bedside table. The sound of his father entering the back door leading to the kitchen told him the time. Corky Trunzo was christened Eugene, but only his mother called him that, and only when she was displeased with him. His father used the Italian, how do we want to say that, Eugenio? Yeah, I don't want to be like the story you tell later about people. Yeah.
The names are not important in the slang.
Okay, all right. When he wanted the boy to pay attention. To everyone else, he had forever been known as Corky, a nickname his grandmother gave him when he was an infant. To ease his teething pain, the woman had dipped wine corks into the fiery grappa she made and rubbed them on his gums. She also allowed the baby boy to suck on corks soaked in her homemade wine. Her belief that vino, even I can pronounce that, was a curative for everything from colic to upset stomachs to a child's unwillingness to sleep. The family story was that cork was the first word the baby said. Corky rolled from his bed and turned on the small bedside lamp before his feet touched the cold wooden floor. He was not tall, but compact and muscled from playing first-string varsity basketball throughout his high school years. Handsome, with warm brown eyes, he wore his hair slicked back in a tall pompadour. Wearing the long johns he slept in, Corky hop-stepped into a pair of heavy canvas trousers. He buttoned a long-sleeve flannel shirt, then pulled a too large wool sweater over his head. Frayed at the edges, a hole at one elbow, the sweater was a hand-me-down from his older brother, and the boy wore it like a uniform. He made a half-hearted attempt at straightening his bedclothes. The shelf above the head of the bed still contained the books his brother read to him each night: Treasure Island, Robinson Crusoe, The Count of Monte Cristo, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Corky fell asleep to the sound of his brother's voice every night of his life, his own dreaming fueled by the older boy's stories.
I'm the table seeing eye person, by the way.
You reading too?
No, y'all go ahead.
No, you go.
No, you go.
Okay, all right. Wow, he gave you a look.
And I do apologize for not introducing everybody up front because I assumed everybody needed no introduction, but John T. Edge, Blair Hobbs, Beth Ann Fennelly, William Boyle. So, get that out of the way.
Tim Lee.
I forgot my name, sorry.
Okay,
Things are different in here.
okay, all right.
Now, I'll say just a brief thing about this. Here, the glasses are now yours. So the reason for our rigmarole is I had cataract surgery this morning, and one eye is now a superstar and the other eye is not. And neither eye allows me to read close up now. So I get the pleasure of my wife, Blair Hobbs, up here with me. Blair's going to read a piece that's set in Water Valley. And I chose that because one of the things I really admired about Jack was, he showed up here in Oxford and quickly became a student of Mississippi and of Oxford and of Water Valley and of all the places in the state, the Delta, which shows up in this book as well. And I think that speaks to the humility with which Jack moved through this world. He didn't show up, you know what it's like when people show up in Mississippi and they've read all about Mississippi and they've seen the movies and they have a narrative in their head and they can't get rid of that narrative. They're not open to the state and its people and what it is. And Jack was not that. He was so very open to Mississippi, and this piece, I think, speaks to the ways he paid attention to one small part of this place he came to love.
Okay, this is chapter 20, and I'll be reading the first page down through the second paragraph on the next page. Sal and Corky sat in high-backed wooden rockers on the porch of the Water Valley boarding house, watching the early morning activity of the Mississippi town's Main Street. The rain, light but steady, fell from low-slung clouds that ceilinged the town, propped on the steeples of the dozen churches, lording over the busy thoroughfare. Cars and trucks passed in both directions, the hiss and slosh of tires plowing the waterlogged street, mixing with muffled clop of horse-drawn wagons and the occasional rider on horseback. There were 3 long days. Sorry about that. They were 3 long days' drive out of Sagamore. Both men were road-weary, and Corky was glad when Sal decided to stop in this small town to rest for a few days. Sipping coffee, Corky took in the long, straight hole of the main street, lined with shops, a 2-story general store halfway down the opposite, an unwelcoming hotel. Further down the block was a grocery cafe, then more shops, and just beyond, a dentist office, the window painted over with an image of a large white molar. Sorry, that made me laugh. Oh, okay. On the next corner was a car dealership housed in a large brick building with a wide, tall windows that ran the entire length of both sides. Behind the windows sat an array of new automobiles and several trucks. Beyond the dealership was a train station, the dome of the roundhouse rising above a thick, hovering cloud of smoke that belched from engines moving into the switching yard. He was filled with wonder at finding himself in a world so far beyond Sagamore. They arrived late here in the afternoon the day before. At the first hotel, they were told no rooms were available. When Sal calmly asked about the many keys hanging on the pigeonholed board behind the desk, the man, without looking up from his newspaper, replied, "Those rooms are reserved for travelers arriving later on the trains." His eyes remained on the page when he added there was a boarding house on the north end of town that he was certain would be more to their liking. "Run by your people," the man said, and looked up over the top of his reading glasses without expression. Corky stepped back toward the desk, and before he could say anything, Sal quieted him with a glance and a tilt of his head toward the door. They left, and when he asked Sal to explain why they'd been told to stay elsewhere, the answer was short. "Things are different down here," Sal said.
Well, the way this book ended up coming about with Susan and I putting it out was that we didn't really know Jack. We met him a few times. John T, you introduced us to him the first time, and he seemed like a good guy and everything. But then, unfortunately, when he passed, this book had been completed, and I know I ran into you somewhere, and we talked about the books, just books in general, and putting them out and all. And then I ran into Michael Farris Smith, who had to bail on us this evening because he took ill, as they say. And Michael was like, "Oh, John T and I were talking and thought maybe this might." And then the next thing you know, everybody's involved and the family's behind it, everybody, and so it worked out really well, and we're grateful for that. But I think I would like to ask a couple of questions of those of you who knew Jack better than we did, just to give a little more perspective. I will say about the book, just it's really interesting hearing sections picked out randomly, because it does cover a lot of space geographically, and it starts in Sagamore, Pennsylvania, and ends up in the Mississippi Delta, and all that kind of stuff. But as John T noted, Jack was not from the South, but he ended up here. So I want to go around and just real quick get a quick, how did y'all meet Jack? How did he come into your lives and that kind of thing? So
Seems appropriate for Beth Ann to start.
Yeah, we all
She was the alpha.
so
We all know.
it's her fault.
Oh gosh, y'all. We had a mutual friend, and every year I get together with my college roommates, and it's one of the happiest things in my life because, I graduated college in 1993, and there's 5 of us women, and, we have a shit ton of kids, so for us all to find a weekend we can get together, it's always so special. One year we decided to go to Martha's Vineyard, and Jack was living there at the time. Weirdly, he wasn't there when we visited, but because we had a mutual friend, he asked for my contact information and said, can I set you up with any restaurant recommendations or something? And it didn't really occur to me that in high season in Martha's Vineyard, everything would have been booked for months and months and months in advance. Well, Jack got us reservations at all the best places, and the chefs were killing themselves to bring things to our table, and here's a round of drinks from Jack, and Jack would love you to have these oysters, insanity. So, but I didn't meet him on that trip, but we talked him into coming to visit us in Oxford on his next drive across country, and he came, and we had a famous night, and he started talking about coming here more and then moving here. The next summer we actually went back to Martha's Vineyard. When I say we, I'm talking about my husband Tommy and me. I was supposed to teach at a writing workshop. They couldn't pay me very much, but they could put me up in this crazy house, one of the oldest houses on Martha's Vineyard. It rented for $10,000 a night. So I was doing it just to get the free vacation for my family, but I was going to be busting my buns all day to teach. I was supposed to be teaching from 9 to 5 all day, but I thought it was worth it for everyone else to have a good time. And the outfit didn't organize it very well, and the class didn't make because they didn't advertise it. And so they're like, well, you can just come and have the house. So I know, it was so amazing. So we got to go, and we hung out with Jack every day, and he's took us to the the secret entrance where Keith Richard comes in the back door. We got to sit at that table. So we, it's just silliness. But this whole time we're talking about food and music and especially books. And he was so hungry to talk about literature. He just loved literature so much and didn't have, a background in literature. So that's kind of why he started coming here more and more and meeting people like y'all. And then, that was the beginning of the end.
What year was that, I think?
I don't know. Yeah.
What, like 15?
Yeah. Yes.
That was my guess.
Yeah.
I went back through my emails trying to figure out that kind of stuff. Like when I had Jack's email address and began corresponding with him, and I found when Blair and I took a trip out to Healdsburg, California, a friend let us have a house in Napa. It's like, we'll go wherever houses are. This
Oh
is
my
what-
God, who are these people with
yeah.
houses?
Crazy. We went to Healdsburg. We were in Napa, and then we went to Healdsburg, and we met Jack at one of his
The first
friends'
time.
restaurants for the very first time. Yeah, and he was just so full of enthusiasms and full of recommendations and full of connections and effusive in his want to share them. And I found this email from him that said, if you head to Diavolo, let me know and I'll ping Dino. He also has a great dive bar on the same block, Geyserville Gun Club. Thank you for using Jack's Healdsburg concierge service.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But that generosity of spirit was I'm kind of taking over this. I didn't mean
That's
to,
quite right.
but like I think about like what Jack left us was a greater connectivity. Like all the people here, including my wife who's now leaving.
My back hurts.
We all knew each other pretty well. Like, this is respect across disciplines and contributions. We're all artists of some sort. But Jack bonded us all together in the community of creative people in this town stronger than we were before. Like, he came to us in a certain way, and we left stronger on the other side of that, I feel like. Because he was so full of those enthusiasms and would put on no airs, threw no elbows, had no pretensions, was just hungry for all of this. And that's the thing. This book is a great gift, but the reason we're here to celebrate this book is in part what he gave us was a new intensity of connection and a realization that we all matter to one another.
William, you got anything?
Yeah, well, I was trying to think. I mean, I don't remember exactly the first time I met him, but it was definitely through Beth Ann and Tommy. It was probably at City Grocery. I think probably most of the time I spent with Jack was at City Grocery. And maybe a few times at your house. We were over there. And I hung out with him elsewhere occasionally, but I think most of our conversations were at City Grocery. And yeah, we kind of hit it off right away. I mean, we just had very similar taste in books and music, and we kind of got into that stuff right away. He liked a lot of loved a lot of the same writers that I love, and he kind of crossed into a lot of the kind of crime fiction stuff that I love, and so we would just have conversations that kind of just kept spiraling out in all these different directions. Talked a lot about music. We were both huge Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell fans, and that would be a lot of time, going down those roads together. Jack did not like Bruce Springsteen, and I spent a lot of time,
So true.
arguing with him about that, and trying to convert him to Springsteen. But we had usually that's kind of a deal breaker for me. But we had so much else in common that I loved him anyway. It was always just one of those people you kind of, even when it would be kind of months between hanging out, because he'd go off and disappear for a while and come back, we just kind of fall naturally back into just kind of these long conversations about books and music, and also, like I said, the Italian stuff. Kind of, I should have said this when I read that passage. Part of the reason I read that chapter is, I read a lot about Italian grandmas, and I love that. I love that character, and I love, I love remembering those conversations that Jack and I would have about our families and kind of similar experiences. Even though Jack was my mom's age, so we had a little bit of a kind of age gap there, but a lot of the same reference points, a lot of the similar experiences. Kind of grew up in very similar worlds.
So along those lines, I would like to give a shout out to Jack's sister, Joni, who was very helpful when she's looking at the manuscript of correcting the Italian phrases. So she had a lot of notes about the Italian phrases, which was very helpful to me. No clue. And so yes, she should get a shout out for that.
And before we forget that, Chico, since you're recording this, she really would like a recording of this, and we can connect you with her later.
And Susan's recording it too, so we'll have backup.
Susan's recording it? There's so many recorders, guys.
I'm just the backup. Jake gives to Thurman Munson.
So, you talk about the sense of community that, Jack helped foster among everybody. And so, I'm sure as he was getting deeper into the writing, the literature and all, that he probably, so it's kind of a two-part question, I guess, like how much did he reach out to his friends who were writers? And then once he created this work, and I imagine all of you read it pretty early on, what was your sort of gut instinct based on having known this guy and seen him go through the process? And those kind of two disconnected but somewhat connected questions, I think.
I wasn't. That's probably more for Beth Ann in terms of you were probably reading stuff as he was writing it. I didn't, but I think all of our conversations kind of came back to craft. He was always wanting to talk about craft, and he was always wanting to talk about influences and what should I read? Who should I read? What crime writer should I read? What have I missed? If I like this, what else would I like? So a lot of our conversations were like that, I think, and just kind of digging into craft and writing about place and stuff like that. But I wasn't reading the manuscript. I didn't read the manuscript until after he died. I didn't read I think when they were first kind of sending it out, maybe, and asked me to blurb it, that was the first time I'd read it. I was like, shit, this is really good. Jack was doing good stuff. I didn't read anything of his. We just kind of talked about it and around it.
For somebody who doesn't know, and I think I know it, but I probably don't know it as well as Beth Ann or Tim, would you give us the TikTok of Jack completes the manuscript on X day, gets edits from John Talbot, and then publication? Because that, even just understanding how tight that timing was, I think would be.
I don't know what the timing was.
I don't really, it was, I'm just trying to remember, because it was quite a while after he passed that it got mentioned to me, and I think, like I said, I ran into Michael, and he sent me the manuscript that day, I think, and I started reading it, and, but John Talbot got involved, and.
While he was, were they partnered up while he was alive?
Yeah,
Yes,
it was.
yes,
they were.
Yeah.
My understanding is that Jack had gotten his last notice from John back
Okay, I don't
less than a
know
week
that.
passed before Jack passed.
Yes.
Yeah, that's,
He had finished the book. It was that swift.
Yes.
yeah,
Wow.
and,
That was the thing I wanted to draw out, because that's just so tough.
Yeah.
it really
Yeah.
is. It was shocking, It was somebody that didn't really even know him, it was just shocking when it happened, and then, knowing that there was this orphan book out there.
Yeah.
So,
And John Talbot, who's not here and lives part-time here in Oxford, has a son who's in school here, took on this project. It's hard for a book to be promoted if the author isn't here. And so when he took on the project, he knew it might not be remunerative, but he took on the project because he thought it was an important thing to do. And he's a good soul. If you meet him on the streets of Oxford,
Yeah,
engage him. He's a good guy who's trying to contribute.
and it's very helpful, yeah.
Yeah.
Because a publisher expects the author to promote the book. So if the author's passed, then they can't do, signings and promotions and stuff. So a lot of publishers would just, no matter how good it was, they wouldn't be interested. So
Right.
that's why we're lucky that Tim and Susan took it on.
Yep.
Well, and also, we were lucky that he had so many friends that were willing to help promote
Yeah.
in their own way, Obviously, you can't sign the book. Well, you can, but you can sign your blurb on the back.
I wanted to circle back to your question about what it was
Yeah.
like to read in an early stage, and just say one of the things I gave Jack hell about was his female characters were so thin and boring. And he didn't read any women. And his bookshelf was all men.
That was a big conversation with him all the time. It's like,
Yes.
what women should I read?
Because you wanna know why?
Beth
Because
didn't
I
see those photos.
would get so mad at him, and then, but you know what? I mean, one thing I love about Jack was that he had such an appetite and curiosity
Yeah.
for learning, because he did, start reading women all the time, and I mean, he was learning me Claire Keegan and all these other cool people, and meeting Curtis Wilkie for coffee and getting Curtis's recommendations about women to read. I mean, it was cool that he turned it around so much, and his female characters got so much better.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we did me, Tommy, Ace, and Michael did one of his podcast
Yeah.
things, which is out there on wherever you find those things. And
Planet
that's
Jack radio, you can still find them.
That's a lot of the conversation was he was asking us for recommendations of women writers. I was like, yeah, I mean, Jack's mostly what I read, really. Like, here, read Megan Abbott, read Sarah Green, whoever. And he was he went out, got them all, like, just stacks of books, and was just kind of opening himself up, because I think he just kind of had been in that one lane.
Does, is it? I have a lot of questions, so,
Maybe they do too.
yeah, but I was gonna say, maybe before, does anybody want to say before we open the floor to questions that wants to add to the conversation we've already had?
I mean, some of what I say will be a repeat because it's the thing I think about when I think about Jack. But like we were, I think, in the third season of True South, and we were going to make a show in St. Louis, and we were going to make a show that was on what was the Hill, what people call the Hill, the old Italian area. There's a great old guard sandwich shop there, and we had this. Wright and I had this. Wright Thompson is the executive producer of the show, and I had this idea. It was like, why don't we get Jack to just play something vaguely Italian in front of this sandwich shop in St. Louis, and it's only a 5-hour drive, and when we were, we cooked. Jess and I, excuse me, I'm talking about our son. Wright and I cook up a lot of ideas, and not all of them would come to fruition. But this idea, even as we were talking about it, I knew Jack would say yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it is to ask somebody to drive 10 hours round trip to play guitar in front of a sandwich shop, and then turn right back around and drive 5 more hours home. And of course he did.
Right. And also, there's the absence of ego there, because this is
Yes.
also so when Bill was just saying Jack would disappear for a couple months, he would be touring
Right.
with the Dire Straits kind of reunion band. He called it the Dire Fakes, but they'd be going to Brazil or all these places and play to huge
he's a
audiences. You know what I
superstar,
mean? Yeah. So that he'd just go and play in front of a sandwich shop.
He played for Salami. I mean, he really did.
Did you say that was True South? Did you say it was True? Okay. I'm paying attention.
He played for Salami.
He did. I mean, that was it. To Beth Ann's point, he had lived this life where he was on top of the world, and he came here to humble himself in a lot of ways, to show he wanted to become a writer, become a better writer. And he showed up in this place where there were a bunch of good writers. He humbled himself in that way, and then when he gave back to this place, it was something like this. Yeah, 10-hour round trip for Salami. Sure. What chord do you want me to play in?
Right, because a lot of people who are very good at one thing don't want to learn how to become a beginner in something else. It's
That's hard.
painful to
It's
be
real
at
hard.
the, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, because that reminds me of a story that I heard Michael tell. But for the people that don't know, Jack played guitar in the band Dire Straits in the '80s when they were huge, and he played Live Aid and all these things. And I guess Jack had known him Michael had known Jack for a while, and they were up at City Grocery naturally. And then he leaves. Jack leaves, and the bartender goes, "Hard to believe that guy was on Live Aid." And Michael goes, "What?" He'd known him for quite some time and had no idea. So that's again, is a guy that didn't brag about his accomplishments and whatnot. So I always like that story. But does anybody have a question?
I had a question for you. So you and Susan published this book, and who are the readers you're finding that are unexpected to you? What are someone who's found this book beyond Oxford or beyond his family circle, someone who's found this book and responded to it, or a mention of it that shows up in a magazine you didn't expect, or
Well, it's funny. I mean, because we don't really hear from people who get the book, but initially a lot of the sales were, places where Jack had lived, West Coast, Connecticut, wherever. But just last week, somebody in North Carolina, without a name we recognize, ordered 6 copies. So somebody's giving them for Christmas presents this year, apparently. But
that's great.
They were on the nice list.
yeah, that's right. But yeah,
But you saw a lot of those nodes where he lived, like he could.
yeah, you can definitely because most of our sales outside of Square Books, Lemuria, and places like that are definitely mail order, and yeah, it was very very central to those areas. So it's just and it's a funny thing that we do publish books written by musicians, which is such an oddball thing, especially when out of the 7 or 8 books we've done so far, only 2 of them are about music. Because that's the first thing people go, "Oh, you do books about music," and it's like, no, this book, this is a novel. it's a, as we were saying, very vast ranging story. It hits a lot of places, but so it makes it interesting when I honestly would have thought there would have been more people around the world who would have gone, "Oh, they got into our streets and bought a book," but you just never know how this stuff's going to go. I mean, I think we all know that the whole world doesn't buy books like we do.
Yeah.
I wish the whole world bought books the way I do, but
Me too.
yeah. But so we can open the floor for questions. Anybody's got anything?
People out here in the audience knew Jack too.
Yeah, it's true. No stories, no.
Did Jack say where he got the idea for the story, or what inspired him? Was it based anything on his true experience?
Well, I think it was based in the area that he grew up in, and kind of the stories and the people he knew there, and this really rough mining place that gave rise to a lot of violence and a lot of stuff that kind of seemed to carry over from the old country.
Yeah, when you read it, you learn about coal mining in Pennsylvania, and you learn about first-generation Italian immigrants and their lives. You learn about this animale, this game warden who's just a horrible creature. And you learn about songbirds and an Italian taste for songbirds.
Yeah, it's interesting that the warden, who's not, he is an evil person, but he's actually based in a historical thing. Like there's this quote from the beginning from one of the naturalist books about birds and whatnot. So the history seems to have been correct and well researched and all
Right.
that.
What about you guys were reading from the Water Valley?
Yeah.
What kind of research? Do you guys know what kind of research you did here
No.
on the Mississippi end of things?
Because the other, like Rosedale, was that?
Yeah.
Rosedale, yeah. And it seems like, was it Tuckapola or something? It's really funny because the first time I read through, I immediately wanted to get out an atlas to make sure he had things in the right place.
Right.
Like it was realistic to be here this day and here the next day.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think he did have it right.
you do a lot of editing too? On that level, like finding errors and things?
I tried to be aware of them, and there weren't many. There was just a lot of cleaning up.
Yeah.
Like anything at
Yeah.
that stage, just needed a lot of cleaning up. And one thing I thought was really interesting, and Joni and I both caught this. There were a couple places where he had the same paragraph
Yeah.
in different chapters, and you could tell that he was pretty pleased with those paragraphs. And they were really good paragraphs. But then you had to sit down and read it over and over to figure out which place it really needed to be in. And actually, I enjoy that kind of thing. That was, I think I figured it out correctly, because
Yes.
it was, okay, this makes more sense here than it does there, but that's pretty entertaining to me.
I also recognize that in my own self.
Yeah.
That's really
You
good.
come up,
Yeah.
I'll just use it as many times as I can. That's, like, a friend of mine read my book, and he said, "Do you know how many times you use the word cool?" Since I'm like 389 or something.
I don't know, I'm asking this question selfishly because I don't know the answer. How did the Jared Spears the cover image come to be?
I believe Michael asked him to do it, and he, it was one of those things that immediately was like, let me get into the semester, and but once he got to it, it was very quick.
Yeah.
And he read the manuscript and, kind of went for it.
So that was an original for
Yeah,
the.
it was
Wow.
for the book.
I thought it was just one of his.
No, he did this for
painting.
the
That's cool.
Yeah.
because that's the Pennsylvania coal mine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was.
If y'all don't know Jared, he's a local artist, lives in Taylor. A good guy.
Yeah, everybody was really great about coming together to make this happen, which is a wonderful thing.
Was because I know Michael is a fan of Blackberry Smoke, and that epigraph, was that in place from Jack?
It was
Or
from
that-
Jack, but Michael did get permission from
pals.
Charlie Starr, so I was like, we're not using it if we can't get permission.
Yeah.
It's like, sorry. But yeah, so everything that came up, there seemed to be a fairly quick solution from somebody, so it was really, because there was some legal stuff, and Lucky Tucker was real helpful with that, just dealing with the estate and all, so. On our end, it was, pretty effortless, just because of the amount of help and just people stepping up. So.
But then I wonder how, from when you first got to know Jack and he was talking to you about literature and his hunger for it and his want to write it, how different did this project end up from the sorts of things he was talking about with you when you first met, or is there great continuity, or what's the
He
case?
was already working on this novel
Okay.
back then. He had written parts of it and had notes for it even back then. But when I first read the draft of this, it was in a much, much different form. It was very shaggy and didn't have a lot of structure, but that's just part of the process. You know what I mean? That's not like a criticism of the novel.
Yeah,
That's just
yeah.
I just read it early, and it needed a lot of shaping, and it, like the expression "killing your darlings," like there were so many things that you could just tell he was having fun researching,
Yeah.
and then it just like he just got off, and we just like lost track of everybody. But he has a really strong narrative line. But the part that Bill read, that chapter, there's a lot of suspense, and you can, when the grandmother's burning the card, and like the boys walking off into the dark, like you really can tell something bad is going to happen. But there's all these other parts that have there's a lot of variation of tone, I guess is what I want to say. Like the part I read about the cork is lighter and kind of just a recollection, just a little bit of family history. But I think he'd be so proud, that that's really what he wanted. He had said that's what he wanted,
He did the
is to
thing.
publish
Yeah.
this book.
He did the damn thing.
Yeah.
Do we know if he had another project in mind?
He never talked to me about one. I think he was really focused on this, but maybe.
Yeah, it's just, when you read this, it is hard to imagine like the thought process that had to go into like mapping all this out, because like I say, you go so many places and so many, different types of characters.
And we haven't said this directly, but you know, this is Pennsylvania from whence he came, and Mississippi are the locales for the book. I mean, it is not autobiographical. It is certainly depends upon the places he
Yeah,
lived and loved.
very much so.
It's kind of what all of us do.
Anybody else got anything?
Anybody else out here know Jack?
Yeah, bunch of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have y'all read the book? Now's your time.
Well, in case you can't find your copy, you can buy it online.
I bet John Eloise has a story.
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, talk about meeting Jack. The first night I met him was at the Sacramento radio show. A lot of you probably know Mary Williams.
Yeah.
And she was all excited that night. And John, I want you to meet a friend of mine. And he plays music. So we shook hands, hello, you know. And he said, yeah, I play a little music. At the time, I honestly didn't know who Jack Sonni was. I'm not a big follower of mainstream music. But we became fast friends, and we shared passions for music, for guitars, Italian food. I'm Italian from Boston. Wine and tequila.
Tequila.
Have you heard of it, JT?
No, the man liked tequila.
Sounds like you need a drink.
Whenever we had a gig, we would always carpool because I knew there was no way Jack could drive home.
Yeah.
And the conversations we would have when he was in that condition were something else.
As in?
That could be a presentation to itself, yeah. We've got a microphone here if you want to.
Time spent with Madonna.
Yeah. That may not be for family consumption.
Okay.
That's funny. Well, so if we don't have anything else, we really appreciate y'all being here, and thanks to Meredith and the library for
Yes,
hosting.
thank you, Meredith. Y'all go get a book if you want.